Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our network and AO2 questions for GCSE Maths.
Thanks, Amy. The first slide we want to show actually is a reminder, a showing. It's brand spanking new, and I believe it was launched today, the Facebook page for Pearson Maths. And I know Mal has been involved with and already on the Facebook page for stats. So Mal knows a little bit more how it works. I'm one of those ones that avoids all kind of social media if I can help it. But I know Mal has been part and parcel of the stats one, and this is all launched now. And when it is for a useful and I suppose insightful location, it might draw me back onto the social media networks as well when you get things like this cropping up. Anything to add on that one, Mal?
You're just a Luddite. Um, so it's just another way of getting in contact with other maths teachers. There's a load of different Facebook groups, and it's just another way of keeping in touch.
And there you go. There's the QR codes as well. Okay, so welcome from us, myself and Mal. We put this slide on the front of everything just to say and remind that we're in the classroom. We've literally ran home from school this afternoon so we can get a decent signal at home or not be interrupted in a classroom to do this presentation. We are teachers from Most Improved School in England twice. TES Maths Team of the Year, and we've also got JustMaths that we look after on the side as well. So in terms of our role, we do mention it at the end. We're what we call credible specialists for Pearson. We are teachers in the classroom that have a dedicated day, Wednesday and Thursday, where we can support schools, go into schools. You can come to us, we can talk over Zoom, we can look at data, we can share our data, we can talk from the point of view of that we've done pretty good over the years. Actually, I'm going to say very good over the years with the GCSE maths qualifications. So please do keep in touch. That's our role with Pearson. Sorry, Mal, go on.
No, just in terms of what we're looking at today, looking at the AO2, I'm just really conscious at this point that every time in the past where any of the exam boards have gone out and said, right, we need to improve AO2 or AO3, that then one of the other assessment objectives gets affected by the impact. But we have got to start somewhere, so that's why we're looking at AO2. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is.
Yeah. And by the end of it, we're hoping to create a bit of a network with you guys. And this is not us saying we know all the answers here. This is us talking through some scenarios, some questions, some, I suppose, data in terms of what our school needs support with as well. So we want to create a network from you guys today that we move forward a little bit in terms of developing this. But the first question, I suppose, is oh, actually, I forgot all back to this slide in last week. I had an English cover last week, and it wasn't this question, but what's your favourite shape and why? And it was the question that was the starter question for this English cover was, and it didn't faze the kids at all. They knew straight away what to go with. It was, would you prefer, if you had to sit next to this year in your English lessons, as part of the seating plan, a character from A Christmas Carol or Macbeth, who would it be and why? And that was their starter question. And I was reading it out, and I was crawling a little bit inside because it's completely out of my comfort zone, that kind of open-ended question where so many different scenarios could come up. My day-to-day, hour by hour, and I've had 5 lessons today, a lunchtime revision session with year 11 before they go into their mock this afternoon. Some rocking up this morning early to go through some questions. My whole day has been pretty much black and white. Without an exception, I think today it's been literally full on black and white. This is right, this is wrong. So the cover last week threw me completely out of that comfort zone. First of all, I can't remember any of the characters in Macbeth or A Christmas Carol, but the kids were very, very good at what they'd recently written. In fact, tell it wasn't Macbeth; it was Inspector Calls and A Christmas Carol. But they knew exactly what to do. They knew the discussion points, and we're not talking here a beautiful group of individuals that love English. This was a complete mixed group of students that I've had to tell off in the past, a little bit rogue, a little bit chatty, but they knew what to do. They knew that open-endedness naturally. They knew where to discuss, how to discuss it, and what the outcomes were supposed to be. So I haven't put that there to literally ask for you guys to put in the chat what is your favourite shape and why. It's more, it's out of our comfort zone. It's different to what we're used to, but it's not different to what the students are used to at all. I suppose these are a little bit out of sync, so I threw that question in there. This is a reminder, polite reminder, don't forget to download the Pearson Authenticator app. The more we remind you, the more chance of you remembering it by the summer when you come to getting results plus, script viewer, etc., etc. So just remember to pop that in onto your phone so it doesn't cause a problem later on. So this is that big question. We've talked, and I remember Mal joining when Mal was an ECT, NQT, whatever we call them back then, PGCE student. Well, no, it was actually NQT, wasn't it, Mal? I think.
Yeah.
And I think it was me that she asked the question to, and to be fair, I was only a year into the teaching at that point as well. What are all these AOs? What do they mean? And there's me trying to be this experienced member of the department, only 1 year further into it than Mal. You know what? I'm not quite sure. And it is one of those areas, and Mal said this many, many times, you assume people know it. You assume this phrase AO1, AO2, AO3, and in some subjects AO4 are understood and known for what they mean. So I think, first of all, what are they? Let's just go through and make sure we fully understand what the AO2s are when it becomes part of the mathematics course. And I think the bit in italics sums it up really at the top. Reason, interpret, and communicate mathematically. Then you've got the bullet points underneath of what that makes up, being able to make deductions, inferences, conclusions, arguments and proofs, and presenting that in a mathematical way. And generally part of those problem solving questions as well, the communication at the end of those type of questions. A slightly more weighting in the higher tier at 30% compared to the foundation tier. And I think when Mal asked me all those years ago, and I think my answer was, I knew vaguely, and I think wordy questions, Mal, the wordy ones.
Reasoning and justifying was what you said to me.
Oh, is that
Reasoning and justifying. And it is. That's what it is. It's the problem solving is the AO3, and these are the reasoning and justifying elements.
And almost, I suppose, proving the deeper understanding. If that, I know we can show deeper understanding with maths and showing all the numbers, but why is it this? Where is it this? How is it this? And that, I suppose, that ability for the student to communicate. And going back when we had the asterisks on the certain questions in those couple of years prior to the 2017 exams, where they can leave their message of what this is showing, what the answer is and why it's that. But I think it needs to boil down to here, that as much as sometimes it feels like it's out of our comfort zone a little bit to teach it, to talk about it, to delve into it as a maths teacher, these kids have it as part of their diets every single day in their other subjects. So it's almost, it's the teacher part of it, and I'm saying me here, not all of you guys, and I don't know if you fall in that same boat as me in terms of it's not a massive part of my general teaching to delve into the whys, the wheres, the hows, the proof. I like to think that I do, but actually in terms of that evidence at the end of the question, not so much sometimes. And I am trying harder and harder, particularly since the 2017. And I say that as if that was yesterday. It feels like it was yesterday. I am doing that more and more as part of my teaching practice to get the deeper understanding and getting the kids to reason and interpret and communicate back to me what it's all about. And it's easier said than done in the day-to-day teaching, and it's definitely easier with those, I'm not going to say higher ability students, because it's not necessarily that. The ones that find maths, and you can still find students on that stay on the foundation course that find the maths natural, whether they're looking for it naturally or wanting to know the whys naturally. And I'm thinking about, and you're all probably doing that now, thinking about a particular student in your class that will ask the whys and the wheres and the hows. And that's when you can jump on what that student is asking you as a member of staff to delve into a little bit more, all of those bullet points there within the rest of the group. But yeah, that is what AO2 is about in terms of the expectations from the government there in terms of the DFE documentation. But in terms of what the exam questions look like, and from an exam board's point of view today, we'll be looking at individual questions and scenarios and ideas of how to get through those and how to share those solutions with the students. Yeah.
And then if you look at the GCSE spec and you want to get into more detail, they are actually broken down into further areas. So like you've got one is broken down into 1A and 1B, etc., etc. And then you can see 4B there is just for the higher tier only. Not going to spend loads of time, but that's available. And it's in the spec, so it does detail the percentage, like Seager said, 25 and 30% of questions need to be AO2 style questions. Marks allocated to it, sorry, not questions. And that's available in the spec.
In red, right in the middle there, we're not alone. You and I spent a bit of time just ploughing through and pulling as many different documentations, whether it's from the DFE, Programme of Studies, for the different subjects, the different exam boards wording, which can vary slightly. I don't mean in a massive way, but can slightly vary just to be their exam board language for their documentation. But we're not alone. We are most definitely not alone. Science in particular, I found interest to really delve into. There is a lot of questions on the science, in particular when you go down into the biology routes and the chemistry, that where they do naturally question further of those AO2 types, the applying the understanding and the knowledge from maybe the mathematical element. But they are used to it, and particularly with a subject that we normally, as practitioners in the schools, heavily correlate our subject to. How many of us in the room at some point have said, but we're maths, we're different? Yes, we are. Put us more closely, possibly, with the science department than possibly the English and the histories. But looking at your English and your histories and those more extended writing subjects can really help us when it comes to these AO2 elements of our subject. And it was interesting really looking back, not just at the actual AO2 descriptors when I was delving into the English and particularly history as well. It was more the support that goes with those AO2s is huge. There's examples out there of how they do scenarios, and I've highlighted up that peel there because that was the conversation I had on this English cover once we gone through the lesson and there was going into more of inspector calls, and they had to give evidence of a certain scenario. Forgive me, I can't remember what that was now, but from the different perspectives of the characters. And they just all said peel. They all started writing peel in their books. Point, evidence, explain, link to the point. I didn't know what that was. They explained it back to me. But it's not just that they're used to seeing AO2 questions in these different subjects, possibly the lesson before yours, possibly the lesson straight after. They're used to and having strategies to deal with AO2 questions as well. And this is where, and it opened up my eyes a little bit, like I've just said a minute ago, that I've made those statements before about actually maths is different. We need to be more aligned with what we're doing in science. Let's go and talk to the science department. Let's possibly link up with science to make some kind of maths across the curriculum. I don't know. But there is an opportunity here to really get talking to that English, history, geography, extended writing subjects on how the student, not necessarily the length of what they've got to answer, but how they break it down and look for what they are doing. What's the strategies that the kids use that you could bring into maths? Okay, you can't go through point, evident, explain, link to the point, but you can talk the language with the kids as you're saying, through these questions, what we're particularly looking for at the end answer. And they've got all these different acronyms and different support structures that I guarantee if you ask one of those year 10, year 11 students that have probably seen it enough times, tomorrow in one of your lessons, they will say, yeah, we've seen peel or seal or wet or rats or whatever all these different things are. So the big message from this slide here is we are most definitely not alone. We're just a little bit unused to it because of most of our teaching is that black, white, yes, no, we've got it right, we've got it wrong, let's move on. Who got that right? Put your hands up, brilliant, most of the class. Let's do the next part of it. So yeah, speak to your other subject heads as well. Speak to your other teachers in that school. This one, I think, actually, we'll come back to this slide a little bit later on. Mal's collected a load of different questions for us to have a look through shortly. And when we're preparing these presentations, and this is the one, not that I've been most worried about, that's not the right way to say it. This is the one that I've been most, I suppose, slow with the presentation because I've wanted to go back, have a look at school, see if that's how we do it, how have we done it, why is it we've done it that way? Because every year when we go back into Results Plus, one of the areas of weakness for my cohorts is when you delve into the questions and go, right, why have they done so badly on that? Is your answer an overestimate or an underestimate? Give an interpretation of the y-intercept. There's always a bit of a common theme. In saying that, last year we did much better on it, but there's been a bit of a theme over the years since 2017 that these areas have been a not a red flag, not hugely bad, but always something that's a bit of a room for improvement. So when Mal put these questions together at the end, it made me go, actually, look at these different command words that are throughout. And there is the Pearson version there, and we've got one that myself and Mal, we put together for ourselves here on the right-hand side with a little example for them as well. So you can have a look at those. But I'll make reference back to these posters or these command words a little bit later on.
So why did we choose to look at AO2? Basically, we want to prove that these networks have an impact. So that was part of it. The second part is everything we do is about the kids. It's about what we can do to prove student outcomes. So I took the skills maps that are available on the Emporium. And on you'll see there's a column that's got AO down the side. So you've got assessment 1, assessment 2, assessment AO1, AO2, and AO3. And I took each of the 6 papers and I summarized if you go to the next slide, Seager, the overall performance for each assessment objective. So this is the foundations here, and you can see that on foundation paper 1, the average student, the mean, was 51.8%. The AO2 was 37, and the AO3 was 41.8, which shows that the AO2 was the lowest performing out of the 3. So the idea being that if we can improve that, we're improving the outcomes for everybody. We're also improving, giving our students skills for life. There was a bit of an anomaly in in paper 3. You'll see that AO2 was the highest performing, so it does vary, but that depends on how the questions have been categorized. And so not everything is what we would talk about AO2 in the traditional sense when we're saying, oh, it's reasoning, it's justifying. It's about those chains of thoughts, the chains of reasoning on the, I don't know, angles in polygons questions, which students do perform well at. So there are what I call non-problem topics that are a low-hanging fruit for us to improve. And then there's stuff that we do really well anyway that is also AO2. So it's not that AO2 is across the board every subtopic or every style of question that's categorized as AO2. There is a room for improvement. I did the same for higher, and it's interesting that on higher, it's not such a problem. You'll see it's the AO3 for higher tier students that seems to be the lowest performing in general. So that's why we chose AO2, and it might be that for next year's events, when we're looking at events, we go, actually, let's have a look at AO3 on higher tier specifically. So it gave us a starting point. The biggest thing for us is about improving our students, really. So I then thought, okay, so let's just put it out there. What are the non-problem AO2 style questions that have come up that we're not going to talk about? So all of these topics in the style of question that we used on summer 24, they're not a problem for us on a national basis. So the idea of this network is for us to just literally focus on the opportunities. And as we go through each of the questions that I've thought, actually, that's really hasn't performed as well as it probably should, looking at some of the things that we can do to improve in our classroom, some of the common problems, and that's what we're going to go through now with some of these questions. And it'll be a
So
sort of
Mal, what do you think on that list there of the ones that are non-problems? Does that match up to you as well? So that's as a national picture. Is there anything on there that you think, and this is for everyone, not just Mal, that actually, although this is generally these are quite well answered, there is something there that doesn't match up to my internal schools data, if you like.
in
I'm looking
terms
through that
of
there. Go on.
so in terms of that, I think all of those things though are applications. So cumulative
Yeah,
frequency, it's very much you do this. So they really, and it's the style of question because it'll be sort of, it could be a 5-mark question where there's 4 of the 5 marks are for doing, and 1 of the marks comes from then interpreting the number of things over 52 or whatever. But they become very processed, they're routine. So maybe that's the difference is for me,
possibly. Yeah.
whereas circle theorems, I think is probably an area that I would need to improve on because if it's a routine problem with a circle theorem, I think my students perform well on. But if it's a non-routine, and I remember about 4 years ago when I was helping out school in Birmingham, and the circle theorem question came up, and it was a proof circle theorem, and it threw everybody. And it was because we were only teaching the application. It was very much the routine problems, angles in a semicircle, um, even alternate segments, but then it wasn't taught from first principles. So that was a massive learning point for me going back, what, probably 8 years ago now.
So very much depends on which circle theorems are part and parcel of the question on
Yeah.
any sitting, isn't it? And we all know that some students grasp some others, some better, but also the wording that goes with, or the exact wording to get the circle theorem correct. We'll have an understanding of the maths, like Mal said, but not so much possibly about the exact wording that it goes with. Yeah, just interesting
Yeah.
there.
And it's interesting there, I made a point that it's quadratic graphs with a table. Without
Mm,
a table, it may have been different. So the first question was question 8 on foundation. This was something that my particular school from last summer came up that it was one of the 4 questions on the foundation paper 1 that we were just below the national average, and I think it's to do with us insisting. We're not insisting on specific terms when it comes, because oh yeah, Josh, I know what you mean when you're saying that. So you see that the common problems there is they're omitting the word point. They're using totally unrelated facts. And the one thing that came through on this, and I've made a point there, is the difference between a reason and their calculation. Quite often you see give a reason and you'll see 360 minus 310 equals 50 as their reason. That's a calculation. And we've got to be really explicit about that when we're teaching it. The other one is the angles on a straight line add up to or in this case, angles around a circle or a meter to point. The one for me is the angles on a straight line add up to 180. I'm now insisting that we talk about it being angles that meet at a point on a straight line add up to 180. And if I don't get all of those words out, this is about a little bit of linking to the principle we've always worked on, Seager, about over teaching. If you insist on more that you want more than that's necessarily, when it comes to an exam situation, they'll deliver what's necessary. And I just
this was another underperforming one for us as well as a school, and this has changed my teaching this year. But also, I love showing the data and the stats and the original question to my current teaching group, and actually pull out what would you write here. And the amount of people, a circle adds up to 360. Nothing about the fact that we're on angles at a point, or if it's on angles on a straight line, or whatever the scenario is. But it is about having, I think you've put there, it's the use of language when you're teaching it, constantly reiterating it, even in an unfamiliar scenario. It might be that you are just talking about it generically and you've got an opportunity to bring it up. But yeah, no, completely agree on that one. That was one for us as well. By the way, we do have far too many questions here to fit in the time, but you will obviously have the presentation to go and look at and delve into a little bit more as departments possibly.
Yeah, and if you then when you and are able to view, if you're able to view the notes pages, underneath the notes pages, I've put a little bit of blurb to give a bit more background as to what my bullet points there mean. So this one was, it triggered me to go and produce a couple of resources for us to use within our classrooms. So when it came to excuse me, the comparisons, where they use numbers, they need to be correct. Lots of students were comparing using numbers that weren't correct. So maybe we need to take away that risk from students and talk about just use words for the comparisons, the reasons, don't need numbers in, the same way that the previous reason didn't need calculations. So that was an issue sometimes. And the common response here was to compare the two medians and literally doing what median one, take away the median of the other, but not actually comparing them. And then some, it was poor literacy. It was less than the other poor responses we saw, but there were some where they referred to they. And again, think about your mocks. When it comes to your mocks, you know your students really well, and you might go, "Oh, when they're using those words, I know exactly what it means." If it's not correct, it's not correct. We're doing them a disservice if we're not, if we're allowing stuff to slip through in a mock because we know those students. So with this one, I produced, it was, I don't know, I can't remember what the topic, I think it was like box plots where it was compare questions, where I gave them sentence starters and they had to fill the gaps. So it would have been the adults were on average dash. To to complete the race, as they had a dash median. So I'd taken away some of the words for them and was just asking them to fill in to try to get them to understand the story. And that's quite an interesting thing to do. Probably a bit late in the year to do it now, but back in September when we were just after we analysed our data and we were looking right at AO2 we need to look at. I then started looking at all these kind of questions.
I had year 9 assessment today, and one of the questions in there was compare the distributions, and my top individual in there popped his hand up and asked you in the middle of the test, and obviously we always say just have a guess, just have a go. I couldn't really answer his question properly, but it wasn't what does compare mean, it was what does distributions mean. And it is about that we like to overteach. We like to go a little bit too far sometimes when we're teaching sequences and dip into maybe some quadratic sequences. When we're doing any kind of maths, it's quite natural for us to go, oh, we've got this, let's go to the next level. So when it comes to every topic, what is it that we can push in terms of literacy? What can we dip our toe into in terms of a compare, a contrast? That kind of ilk to help them, not necessarily when it comes to having a question that needs to be written. It helps when it comes to understanding what the actual concept is a little bit more, because you've over taught it in that element of, I suppose, arguments against for that kind of scenario. And the way I started the slides off, what's your favorite shape and why, and going into more of proving and sharing what you know about. And just, it was interesting that out of that question, it was the word distribution that came up. It wasn't compare, it wasn't what he was being asked to do, it wasn't the command, it was one of the words within it.
That's interesting. But not all the problems are about the words they use. Some of them, so this one, for example, it's quite straightforward, describe the transformation. Rarely were students able to get full marks. It is a case of maybe they're not getting enough practice. Maybe they're not. So part of our strategy is making sure. So my year 11s, I'm just about to do all 4 transformations with them in the next couple of weeks, because I know they're likely to come up. But interesting, my initial reaction, it was, oh, maybe they've used 2 transformations because that would be the common one. And breaking down the question, the fact the word single there has been highlighted. But it was really uncommon for students to write to give 2, which I was quite shocked at. So sometimes it's not that there's no reason. This wouldn't be one that you strictly go, oh, this is an AO2 style question, but it is. And it's an area of opportunity for us to just make sure they get the practice in the next few weeks.
The question there, so describe fully the single transformation, or that phrase, so not necessarily this question. It does sound like I'm making this up when I'm saying about cover last week, year 9 test today, year 11 today. I promise. Year 11 today, they're in their mocks. We had them period 3, so sandwiched in between. So I had a good turnout today. There was no disruption because there was no exam in that one. And the plan was today to start transformations. They've seen transformations over the years before, but there is always something about transformations in year 11 that needs, I think, from my history of teaching it and getting the marks on the exams, that needs a good spell at it now. So I've got a little booklet where we work through. Starts off with enlargements, doing quite obviously enlarge the shape. The command being a draw or a get the image down. Then I'll throw in the describe fully the single transformation, and the picture is clearly with one shape bigger than the other. But going through and just breaking the words down, which I do with this topic, and I don't necessarily do it as much as I do or should do with the other topics, was quite, it was nice today, the way it was almost different people were unable to explain what the different words mean. So describe, someone went straight away, that means explain. Fully, someone else called out there, no, that means everything. The single, one. Transformation, right, transform, transformers. And it was the way Kean said today, transformers. He wasn't trying to be funny, he was just converting the word in his head. And then, okay, so what's a transformer? What do? Oh, they change. Oh, here we go. So we're going to describe everything to do with the one of these changes. And it was natural to break it down with this topic. And I'm pretty sure this is something that a lot of us do with this topic. And is this something we can do more with other areas? Break it down one word at a time. And it was just nice that it just happened again to be today when we was doing this with year 11.
And this is another one that's not necessarily what you would classify as reasoning and justifying, but it is. But it's that whole chains of reasoning and not justifying, chains of reasoning. But the first part of this, it was that P complement. Lots of students thought it was a print, or lots of my students came out and thought it was a print error. It's happened in our recent mocks where they thought it was a print error. We've got to make sure we're teaching to the top end of the spec, I suppose. So that was the message from that, is just make sure we're teaching everything we should do to all of the kids we should do. And hopefully they'll be get used to, or they will expect it. This, for me, was one that I thought, oh, it's not a topic that I do teach it to all of my foundation kids. I think students find it difficult. To grasp and remember. And one of the things for us in terms of an opportunity is that I enforce or constantly reinforce the message to my students that the vast majority of those questions, especially where they're 2 or 3, 4 or 5, there has to be something that's available in that question for every student of every grade. So even my weaker students, I'm saying to them, I want ink on every question. I want you to attempt every question because there should be something for you in it. Even if it's just identifying the y-intercept in this case. So again, not necessarily what it's the wordy questions, but it's classed as an AO2 style question. And that was for me, and I do that with because I only teach foundation in year 11 at the minute. So both my groups have had that message that there's something in every question for all of you. And I think the low-hanging fruit, that is a phrase we use a lot, would be let's focus on the intercept.
Yeah, I think this topic in particular and scattergraphs is one of those ones where you can start going off naturally into, and there is lots of examples out there. It doesn't have to be just a y equals mx plus c topic, lesson, week, I don't know, but it can be where you then can associate it with that deeper understanding and questioning around the room, interpret the y-intercept. Okay, not so much on here, but throw in different command words than what you find in those questions just to get the conversations going in the lessons. My son has just come home yesterday. Genuinely, this is not me making it up. Maths is my life. Scattergraphs. He was given a ruck of exam questions just to practice. He's in year 9. They're all GCSE exam questions, and they were all pretty much of a muchness. A couple of them had the extra crosses to put on. All of them pretty much said the same version of events, which was, what type of correlation does this graph show? I then threw to him, right, I want to change that word to relationship. What are you going to answer? His understanding completely changed to what was going on in that question just by changing and saying, right, I'm going to change that word to relationship. Even though I didn't say I'm going to change the dotted line or any kind of space or the position in the question, I just changed the one word. And it was interesting just watching him trying to come up with something completely different. So when the more hours of sunshine, and he literally started to talk like that rather than with the command word or the command of what type of correlation. And having that conversation with students and with my son about how things can look different but mean the same things is a great opportunity. But also when you've got a question that can have a concept or story behind it, a straight line graph, and not necessarily does have a story behind it. So that's a pretty standard one that's on the screen there. But if you start putting it in context about filling up a water bottle or whatever scenario, it's got a different meaning and a different understanding and possibly different command words. And there's the question from me and Mel always use this as our go-to, but after we've done pretty much the standard selection of scatter graphs. We've done a bit of positive correlation, a bit of negative correlation. You talk about some outliers. What is an outlier? Right, what scenarios happening here? One's going up, one's going down. We're talking about correlation. We're talking about relationship. And then throw them the question, and Mal's smirking. She knows exactly what I'm going to say. The paddling pool question from the mock, was it specimen set 2, I think it was one of the early ones. And if anyone just googles it, it's the paddling pool GCSE scattergraph question. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll ping it to you. So I found it on my phone last night, showed my son after going through all the other standard ones. And the first question was, one of the points is an outlier, give a possible reason why. And again, it's that understanding of what that picture is showing. And it was just interesting how learning the scatter graphs by rote and understanding what they're doing through completely when you asking, what is that outlier about? And it wasn't, the instant reaction wasn't to talk about what it could be. So the scenario of that outlier was, it was a hot day, warm day, 24 degrees with not many people in the paddling pool. And all the different scenarios over the years that myself and Mal have heard, after you've got through the initial conversations of, it's not a mathematical question here, this is not asking for the coordinate of it, this is not asking for numbers associated with it, this is asking for why are the students in the paddling pool when not many students when it's a hot day? And you start getting then a hybrid answer between the two. And what I mean by that, it's too hot because they're looking at the numbers that the cross was in line with, and it's the furthest to the right, but they're not associating it to real life. You're not going to have a day where it's too hot to go in an outdoor paddling pool. But that doesn't come to mind when you're looking at the hard fact and the topic of scatter graphs in front of you. And then you start going down the route of and gradually getting to the answer. I think it's one of the best scenarios you can do when you're teaching scatter graphs and go into that version and that exact question. Then it comes back in, what type of correlation does it show? Oh, we know that one. Then it says estimate, and it doesn't say draw a line of best fit on, which has happened quite a few times over the recent years. Incidentally, I think the November sit-in this year did have a draw a line of best fit on, but this one doesn't. But then it goes back to why would it not be sensible to use the scatter graph to predict how many people are in the paddling pool when it's 13 degrees? Right, instantly you go back again and you get this hybrid answer between the maths and real life. So what's in front of you in real life? And the instant reaction is, it's too cold, because you're in that thought process a little bit more now of the whys, the hows, what's going on here in the story. But you're not reading the words. Why would it not be sensible to use the scatter graph? And again, it's about this language and over breaking it down sometimes. As soon as you see use the scatter graph, your eyes go back to the scatter graph, 13 degrees. Oh, the line of best fit won't reach. And it's a brilliant one to go through the roots of what you're doing by rote. Okay, I understand it. Correlation, positive, negative, line of best fit, all the procedures, but then fully understanding what's going on. But yeah, Brilliant question, that one of my favourites.
Then this one, it's another transformations question, which it just shows us that this is one of those low-hanging fruits for us to get some practice in for this summer. What is interesting though is that where students use or attempted to use tracing paper, they were more likely to end up with some of the marks available to them. So where they'd actually gone, oh, there's my, or put a cross, which we assume hints that they've used tracing paper. And then they would generally also, if they're looking to miss something, missing the clockwise, anti-clockwise. So again, be mindful about what you accept and that we want to be having those full descriptions coming out for students. And not just restating the question, which is some students seem to think that was okay. So there's a bit of a common theme here. Some of the AO2 questions we can improve by giving them more practice. And as you'll see, the next couple after this are a bit more about that reasoning kind of thing that we would expect. So with this one, it is about understanding what is required, so that it wasn't written as a fraction. Some students didn't attempt it because they assumed that if they can't do part A, they couldn't do part B. But again, that comes down to exam technique. We train them to say that there's, even if you can't do part A of a question, part B is still accessible. And then in terms of things, if you're looking for practice, some of the, and you've got your access, you've got your Pearson authenticated app, use Exam Wizard and don't just stick with the GCSE as the subject, Maths GCSE. Go and have a look at some of the stats questions. Some of them will push them beyond that overteaching where you need them to be, so that when they come back to the Maths GCSE, they'll go, oh, that's easy compared to what I have been doing, which is the intention with overteaching. Recurring notation. So we're there on higher paper 1. Recurring decimals. Again, this is parts of that chains of reasoning. Be careful about notation. So they need to have either the recurring number of digits have to be as the number of digits that are shown on the mark scheme. So in this case, there was 4 recurring digits, but they need to, or the ellipsis. The safest bet is that you do insist on the ellipsis on the end, because otherwise they become terminating numbers. That's an easy fix for us. But then again, linking to that overteaching, don't just have a question. Think about your variety of questions you're using. The EMC, so the new extended math certificate, level 2 qual from Pearson, the textbook from it has some lovely questions that will really push your students beyond GCSE. That includes arithmetic with recurring decimals. So definitely worth looking at. But the easy fix here is insist on ellipsis. This one now, going back to foundation paper 2, they simply weren't making a decision. I've just done a network meeting for stats looking at appropriateness. And one of the key things that came out of it was students are really keen to tell you the reason, but they miss that simple step of the decision. So, or they will, if they've made the decision, they're really keen to give you the reason. Or so when you're practicing them, so they struggle to go, is she correct? I don't know. And they just write no, because they think that's what the question requires, yes or no. Well, it's a gateway qualification. You're not going to get a mark that's based on a 50-50 chance. Yes or no. So there needs to be more. So I will now tell them in year 9 and 10, not in year 11. Right, I'm telling you, she's not correct. You need to tell me why. So once a decision's made for them, we almost need to focus on the reason, not the yes or no. Because once they make that decision, they can then focus on forming the words for the reason. And in terms of this, where the mark wasn't given, the student had said that she was correct incorrectly. And then some of the times it wasn't a decision. The biggest thing was there wasn't a decision made. And then it's about that being succinct with it as well. The next question, which is a conversion graph, it was part B was really, really poorly answered in comparison to just reading off a graph. So again, think about the questions you're doing in class. Are you using where students use the build-up method? So like I've done there with 10 grams, scaling up, scaling down, as I call it in class, they were more likely to be successful, but some students seem to think they could extend the graph and guess from it. It's not even something that any of us would probably show them as a possible method. But I will reiterate the method to my students. Look, this once we've made a reading, any reading on there, I can scale it down, scale it up. That link into a method that is familiar to them. It's because I use scaling up, scaling down with it's proportion, isn't it? So making it familiar to them. This one was poorly answered. I'm thinking most or many were not able to start the question. When marks were awarded, they were able to award 3 because of the wording at the end. They were unaware of the properties of a trapezium. So the whole co-interior angles. So they missed on the final mark because they weren't able to provide a suitable conclusion. So is that this for me was when I went, okay, fair cop, but it's generally not something I'm going to lose sleep about. Because for foundation students, in my head, I'm thinking that's probably for your real top end of foundation. For higher tier, I would probably expect them to know the properties of a trapezium.
When the students came out of the exam and we eventually got to see the paper, and you naturally want to go through, and the students and the conscientious ones are asking you, have they done it right? And again, Mal's just kind of summed it up there, because we teach very similar groups in terms of the foundation groups in year 11. And the ones that went on to do very, very well on that paper that came back and questioned straight after naturally got to the 360. So they knew what to do. They had the tools in them to know how to do a topic like this or attack a question like this. They knew they were going to the 360, went back in, substituted the values back in, and their communication to show it was a trapezium was the 4 angles added up to 360 at the end. It wasn't the fact of the co-interior to finish this off in terms of it being a trapezium. So yeah, in terms of my very best students on foundation would have a different conversation to the ones that were dipping into and going into the higher tier, particularly the ones that are comfortable in the higher tier. So their communication of what, I think going back to the very first slide that Mal said, and compared the higher versus foundation success at AO2, I think this is a perfect example that backs up that stat that Mal's shown us.
Yeah. And the other one about this on that is that there was some attempts to use the formula for area of the trapezium from the exam aid. But that will probably be students grasping at straws, which you can't fault that because they're having a crack at it. They're having a go at it. So there's about another 7 or 8 questions, maybe more, for you to have a look at that's got the problems, possible strategies, because I'm just conscious of time, that cover the rest of the papers for you to have a look at when you get the resources. And it does make interesting reading. So the next one, very quick. Can you go back to that a number N, that one? Again, tell them she's wrong. She's wrong. Give me a reason. Because that came through loud and clear with the statistics data we looked at. So it's a common theme for us to say this: they struggle to make the decision, but once the decision's made, they can waffle on. They can probably come up with some kind of description. I don't mean to say that they waffle on. But when I'm in my teaching, I will say, right, I'm telling you Layla's correct. Don't focus on that. Now let's deal with the next stage.
We can almost spend another hour, couldn't we, looking at all
Yeah,
the different scenarios and
there's
take a bit of time and
loads.
look at these, but look at what the strategy ideas that come out from the stats and the data that comes from these type of questions. Give them conclusions and focus on the reasons. And like Mal just said, why? Okay, right, they're wrong. Go for it. Come on, argue back at me, talk back at me, give me some ideas why. You've got gap style questions that Mal mentioned earlier. Take out keywords. The thing that I mentioned earlier, speak to other departments. What do they do to get conversations going around these kind of questions? We've got the support from Pearson. There's lots out there. We've got the Emporium, access to scripts, Exam Wizard. Don't forget, get that authenticator app on your phone. We've got myself and Mal, credible specialists that are in the classroom but know the qualifications. You've got the subject advisors at Pearson. Mal's already mentioned the extended math certificate. If you haven't seen that yet, please have a look. What a way to push your top end mathematicians and really get them looking at more maths, juicy maths that really, and I'm going to say this, supports the GCSE and helps them get better at their GCSE as well. Loads of support, and all these slides help sum that up. I do want to get to our email addresses because I promised that at the start. Please keep in touch. We want to create a bit of a network with you guys. Drop us a mail, even if it's just a hi, but we can start the conversations on how do you do this? I've got a question here. We get, we had an email this week, just how would you mark this question? So Mal bounced it back, had a word with Pearson, had a look how we would do it, and gave a reply back. So please, please, please keep in touch.
And I always finish
Hopefully.
these things by saying, even if you've only got one golden nugget, it was worth turning up. We don't
Absolutely.
profess to know everything about everything. It's about starting a conversation, but it's just about one golden nugget. It's probably you've had a great day if you've learnt one thing or thought, or even just questioned your practice. It's been worth it.